Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Andrew Bergman, a member of the UAWD Steering Committee, a longtime UAW member from higher ed from Local 5118, and newly an auto worker member at UAW Local 22 as a GM worker at Factory Zero here in Detroit. And as they both said, along with Jesse and Tamar, I'm also a co-chair of UAWD's Palestine Solidarity and Peace Economy Committee. And before we get started, I'm going to change my background for a second so you all can check it out. We want to just let you know a little bit about what UAWD, as Jesse said, Unite All Workers for Democracy is. Many of you here from the UAW, many of you are here from outside the UAW. I'll spotlight myself for a second so you can check out this background. It's a wonderful background Tamar made of many of our members and campaigns that we've led for the past few years. So yeah, UAWD is a rank and file caucus leading the reform movement. I'm wearing the shirt as well in the UAW, where we've been led by some incredible auto workers who have been a part of the struggle for decades. Folks on this in this wonderful image, like Martha Gravatt and Mike Cannon and others who have been fighting for reform and for rank and file power in the UAW. And yeah, what we've done in recent years is to especially fight for direct elections when one member, one vote in the UAW, and then run the members united slate and win, sweep those elections and bring a wonderful new group of leaders into the union who, amongst other reforms, led the stand-up strike, which with Sean Fain at the helm. So our movement has been picking up pace, but besides the leaders we elected, our primary focus is the rank and file and bringing change to the local level from the bottom up. And so yeah, if you're a member here of the UAW and you want to learn more, please send us a message. You can feel free to DM us. And if you are not a member of UAWD but would like to become one, you can just check us out at uawd.org, and you can join at uawd.org/join. So yeah, really excited to have all of you members of the UAW and not, but we want to make sure you sort of know where we're coming from. And with that, I'll hand over to Tamar.
Again, so just a reminder again that the event will be recorded, and I wanted to just once again share the rundown so that you know what's coming up in the event. So I'll stop sharing right now, but you'll see all these amazing speakers and panelists. And there'll be an opportunity for dialogue and questions from you during the panel or sort of after the beginning of the panel. So just a few words. As union members and organizers, we all know that division is a classic management tactic that tries to pit workers against each other. And on a global scale, the same thing happens. The ruling class divides us by language, by religion, by nationality, etc. And those divisions and the violence that is used to uphold those divisions really serves capitalist interests and corporate profit. Even before the current crisis in Gaza, we knew that Israel uses the occupied territories as a testing ground for the weapons and the intelligence systems that they later sell for billions of dollars. And at the same time, the US provides Israel $3.8 billion per year so that Israel can purchase weapons from US weapons manufacturers. Meanwhile, workers, thousands of whom are UAW members at companies like General Dynamics and Caterpillar, are making weapons and parts for weapons without always knowing or having any say in where the output of their labor goes and for what purpose their labor is being used. Some parts workers don't even know if their products are going into rockets that go to space or rockets that are used to kill people. But ultimately, workers are making weapons and military equipment and doing scientific research that eventually kills other workers and their families in other parts of the world. So this moment with the extreme crisis and genocide in Gaza shows us the need for an internationalist labor movement, a movement that understands that the imaginary lines they call borders are just one more way that the ruling class and capitalists try to divide us, and that we have a collective self-interest in global unity of the working class.
Yeah, thanks, Samar. And so, I just told you about UAWD, and now we just want to briefly say before we bring on our first speaker that this event is happening because of the commitment that the UAWD membership, so rank and file members of the UAW across the country, made to organizing for Palestine liberation, both within the UAW and across the labor movement. And that happened at our membership meeting last year in December. Since then, we've built our UAWD Palestine Solidarity and Peace Economy Committee, focusing on educating ourselves about Israeli apartheid and the ongoing genocide in Palestine, how workers here in the US contribute to that conflict, and how we as rank and file union members can take the lead in cutting the imperial ties Tamar described that link corporate profits here to the slaughter of Palestinians. We're also committed to learning about examples of transitions away from harmful industries and advocating for a just transition for workers away from weapons manufacturing and towards a peace economy, which you'll hear more about later from Jesse. Our committee has brought together UAW members from higher ed, active manufacturing workers, and retired auto workers who spent years building a radical vision of internationalist unionism from the shop floor. Our organizing has been built on the idea that we can only be successful by building deep ties between workers within our communities and across the working class, which is why we're so excited to welcome you all here today. If the strength and knowledge of Arab American communities can be brought together with the growing rank and file union movement, we can redefine what working class solidarity means and win a better world for all of us, from the shop floor to Gaza. And so with that, I would like to, I'm gonna look through the attendee list here to find her. I'd like to introduce one of those incredible retirees that has those decades of experience, Martha Gravatt, UAWD's retiree representative, who I've been honored to serve with on the steering committee and learn from for years. Martha is a UAW Local 869 member who spent decades leading shop floor struggles that spanned issues from workplace grievances to international solidarity. She has been a historian and mentor to so many of us in the UAW rank and file movement. And before we hear from the other guest speakers, we're welcoming her here today to give us some context on the ongoing state of Palestine solidarity organizing and the labor movement. Thanks so much, Martha. Take it away.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for coming. In December, UAW passed a resolution at our membership meeting, and it said in part, UAWD is committed to the liberation of all workers from exploitation and oppression in the US and around the world, and sees the struggle for Palestinian liberation as one part of our mission, which is focused on building shop floor rank and file movement within the UAW. And this mandate from our membership led to the creation of this committee, the Palestine Solidarity and Peace Economy Working Group, to some internal UAWD education programs that some of you attended, and now this public forum. We're acting today in the best tradition of social justice unionism. For example, the UAW's solidarity work that helped bring down apartheid in South Africa and brought Nelson Mandela to Detroit. Decades earlier, after the victory of the Flint sit-down strike in 1937, the UAW Women's Auxiliary supported the fight against fascism in Spain, adopting children who were made orphans by the Spanish Civil War. And there are many, many examples in between. What we're doing now in our efforts to put an end to apartheid in Palestine is part of our broader effort to turn our unions around, because for too long, they've been at best neutral, or more often worse, on the struggle in Palestine. They've supported the Israeli apartheid state, giving billions to that state by investing our hard-earned dues money, and also allowing our pension funds to be invested in Israeli war bonds. The movement to reverse this outrageous situation is not a new one. We'll hear later about a historic action by Arab auto workers, excuse me, and supporters in 1973. But it has accelerated now because the genocidal character of the Zionist state has been exposed before the eyes of the whole world, with over 33,000 Palestinians killed, a majority of them civilians, and a huge number of them children. The killing of 7 international relief workers and their Palestinian driver just underscores the goal of the Netanyahu government, which is to bomb and starve the Palestinian people into submission. But we are in solidarity with that struggle that shows no sign of submitting. Now, unions representing some 9 million workers, a majority of all union members in the United States, have called for a ceasefire in Gaza. This is a historic shift, and the UAW was one of the first to call for a ceasefire, first announced to the news media by UAW Region 9A Director Brandon Mancia, and then again by UAW President Sean Fain himself. And these are both IEB members that UAWD campaigned for. And we applaud their actions, but credit must also be given to rank and file UAW members who pushed our leaders, who called and emailed to stress the importance of coming out strongly for Palestine. UAW Labor for Palestine did a lot of work for that. We need to build on these achievements to raise worker solidarity with Palestinian liberation to a much higher level. A growing number of Labor for Palestine organizations have sprung up, and they are centering the call. And we also, in our resolution, centered the call from 30 Palestinian unions and worker organizations. Our Palestinian union siblings have workers around the world to, quote, to refuse to build weapons destined for Israel, to refuse to transport weapons to Israel, to pass motions in their trade union to this effect, to take action against complicit companies involved in implementing Israel's brutal and illegal siege, especially if they have contracts with your institution. And 5, pressure governments to stop all military trade with Israel, and in the case of the U.S., funding to it. UAWD's resolution draws attention to this call. Now there's a new May Day call from the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions. The PGFTU criticizes world unions, especially U.S. unions, for having, quote, retreated to verbal positions without taking measures on the ground or pressuring, excuse me, the decision makers to stop this war of extermination, limiting union activities to conferences and statements and not delving deeply into the need to guarantee humanitarian aid or influencing international public opinion to expose the truth about Zionist crimes and the practices of the allied countries that continue to support Israel. So clearly, our unions do have to do more. But what we've done is really phenomenal. We need the solidarity of the whole global working class, in unions and not, to amplify the slogan, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martha, for highlighting the efforts of rank and file workers and the UAW and beyond And thank you to all of you here fighting against oppression and genocide. I want to acknowledge all the great links and comments that are being posted in the chat. So pay attention to those as ways to connect. Um, Now we have the honor of introducing some really amazing activists and movement elders who have been instrumental in changing the narrative in the US on Palestine and have done really tough but necessary work in the name of solidarity and liberation. So first, I'd like to welcome Layla Elabed, an organizer with We the People in Southeast Michigan. She's a proud daughter of Palestinian immigrants, and her father, Harbi Elabed, worked on an assembly line at the Ford Flat Rock assembly plant. Layla was the leader of Michigan's Vote Uncommitted campaign and has been working closely with organizers in other states to extend the campaign to their primaries. In fact, I just submitted a blank ballot here in New York, thanks to your great campaign. And we've asked her to speak about the Uncommitted campaign and its successes. Thank you so much for joining us today. And please correct me if I mispronounced any part of your name. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. My name is Layla Elabed. I'm first generation Palestinian American. My parents are from the West Bank, and I currently have family that still live in the West Bank, from majority from my mother's side of the family. I'm a longtime organizer within the Dearborn and Detroit communities, working across a number of issues, local issues and statewide issues. And the very first time I was ever involved in electoral politics was as a kid, and you know, watching my sister, my older sister Rashida, as she organized in her community, the Arab American and Muslim American community, and kind of tagging along to build political power among Arab American and Muslim American communities, by registering Arab Americans and Muslim Americans to vote for the first time, and a GOTV push. And a lot of people ask, like, how myself and my siblings, especially Rashida, how we got involved in politics, and all of that. And what I can say is it's largely due to the fact that our father, who came to this country from Palestine, became a citizen and became a member of the UAW when he worked for Ford Motor Company. And that's really where he learned this discipline around democracy, and utilizing the vehicle of democracy through the Democratic Party. And he really instilled those values into all of his children, into all 14 of us. And my sister Rashida jokes that, on our 18th birthdays, it wasn't, happy birthday. It was, okay, go register to vote. And it's very much true, that he really instilled in this value of voting and using the ballot box as a way to voice what we wanted, and largely that was through the Democratic Party. So as an organizer, and as a Palestinian and Muslim American, I've been organizing a long time in my community. And after October, it has been extremely hard to continue doing this work and building power in these communities without talking about what is happening in Gaza, as our community is being directly affected by what's happening there. We are losing loved ones, we are losing family members, and we are losing friends. And it's not just those of us who have family in Palestine and occupied West Bank or in Gaza. Our community is largely affected by what is happening because of how it affects the region, from south of Lebanon to Yemen to Syria to Iraq. It largely affects this community. And so I was hosting house meetings, to be totally honest, I was hosting house meetings around DTE's rate hikes, and our utility. And the discussion kept coming back to what's happening in Gaza. What do we do? How do we continue or putting pressure on this administration for a ceasefire, because we've done demonstrations, we've done rallies, we've marched, we've done die-ins, we've called our electeds, we've emailed our electeds, we've done everything possible. And still, at this point, we are so many months into this genocide, and we are thousands of Palestinians murdered by Netanyahu and his right-wing government, as a collective punishment. And so the conversation kept going back to, what do we do in November? Because as Palestinians, as Muslim Americans, and as Arab Americans living here, we feel a deep betrayal, not just by Biden himself, but the Democratic Party, as Arab Americans and Muslim Americans have largely flexed our political power through the Democratic Party. And that's examples of, Rashida, Abdullah Hammoud, all who ran their races as Democrats. And so, there's these conversations. And not only that, we feel a deep betrayal, as it was largely the Muslim and Arab American community that rallied behind Joe Biden during his 2020 race, based on the promises that he would fight fascism, that he would fight against authoritarianism, that we could count on him to give Muslim Americans in this country and Arab Americans in this country something to hope for, where we wouldn't be demonized and dehumanized with something like a Muslim travel ban, only to watch our president under a Democratic Party align himself with the most fascist and authoritarian government, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the right-wing Israeli government, who we can make clear parallels to Trump and the whole mega folks. And so the fact that we were seeing, and still we are seeing till now, that Joe Biden would rather put his presidency at risk, put our democracy at risk, to align himself with a genocidal maniac like Benjamin Netanyahu, is a deep, deep betrayal, not just for Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, but a deep betrayal to Democrats who, before the Uncommitted campaign was even into fruition, already 70% of his base support a permanent and immediate ceasefire. 66% of American voters support a permanent and immediate ceasefire. We do not want our tax dollars being used for weapons and bombs that are killing people, an entire people in Palestine. We do not want to see our taxpayers used to destroy ancestral land. And so, because of all these conversations, and because we needed to continue putting pressure on this administration to save as many lives as possible on both sides, and we knew all media coverage was being switched over to covering the elections. This is the bread and butter of mainstream media, is elections. And so what we were seeing by our communications experts was that mainstream media was pulling out of covering Gaza on the ground, covering what was happening with the protests, with ceasefire movements, and they were all turning that towards the 2024 presidential election. And so we said, how can we continue highlighting what is happening and continue using the vehicle of mainstream media to put that pressure on Joe Biden and his administration and the Democratic Party? And so that is when the theory of change around Michigan's uncommitted option came into play. And this is not a new concept. This was the uncommitted campaign is something that was used during Barack Obama's presidential run in 2008 against Hillary Clinton, when he was not on the primary ballot in Michigan. And so what the Barack Obama campaign was able to do was able to mobilize Black voters, young voters, BIPOC voters to vote uncommitted as a way to embarrass the Hillary Clinton campaign. And it worked. It largely worked. And so we just took that same theory of change and said we would use this vehicle in Michigan, where there's a large community that are being directly affected by what is happening. And we know how strong the ceasefire movement is in Michigan. And we're going to use all these ingredients to send a clear and strong message to President Joe Biden, his administration, and the Democratic Party that they were going to be in trouble in November if they did not change course now, if they did not change policy now. And the two main demands we have through the uncommitted vote and through the uncommitted movement is we need a permanent and immediate ceasefire, not a humanitarian pause, not a temporary ceasefire, but an immediate and permanent ceasefire, a lasting ceasefire that would save lives on both sides. And what we also needed, we needed to stop sending our millions of dollars of taxpayer funds to the Israeli military that are carrying out a genocide before our eyes in 2024. And it's not, and it was, and so, you know, we came together largely, a lot of the Michigan organizers, Michigan activists, Michigan political strategists, and we were able to launch Listen to Michigan, the Uncommitted movement, and it was incredibly successful. We had a margin of victory of 10,000 uncommitted votes, and that was the margin of victory that Donald Trump won against Hillary in that race. And so we said if we could get 10,000 votes, we could show that President Biden was going to be in trouble come November, because Michigan is a pathway to the White House. And that is very important. You cannot win your, you need Michigan to win your presidency. And what we saw through our movement that was multicultural, multi-faith, multi-generational, multiracial, is that Michigan is pro-Palestine, Michigan is pro-ceasefire, Michigan is anti-war, and Michigan is pro-peace. We were able to win over 101,000 uncommitted votes. We were able to get out of 83 counties in Michigan, 73 of those counties voted at over 10% uncommitted votes. And we won 2 delegates. We won 2 delegates in the 6th district and then the 12th district. And what we were able to do, we never set out to win delegates throughout this. We just wanted those 10,000 votes to send that message. And we did that resoundingly with over 101,000 votes. And then we won 2 delegates in the 6th and 12th congressional district. And now we are going to send those delegates to the DNC to represent Michigan voters who said they were anti-war and they are pro-peace and pro-ceasefire. And now we have seen this movement grow. We are at over 1 million protest votes, humanitarian votes across the nation in states, Minnesota, Washington, Wisconsin, Hawaii, Missouri, Colorado, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Georgia, New York. All of these states have utilized some form of a unifying vehicle to tell the president, we need an immediate ceasefire now. And what I want to make clear is this movement is really about saving lives. This is an extension of the ceasefire movement. This is the political arm of the ceasefire movement. Because like I said, we've hit the streets, we marched, we rallied, we did die-ins, we did demonstrations, we wrote letters, and then we spoke the language of our electeds, and we used the ballot box to carry out a humanitarian vote and a protest vote. And it was incredibly successful. In Michigan alone, we were able to mobilize 43% of non-voters and unlikely voters to vote in the Michigan primary uncommitted. What we did that the Democratic Party was unable to do is that we were able to mobilize voters to come out and vote who would have stayed at home. And what we've shown is that President Biden needs to listen to his core constituency, needs to listen to Michiganders, and he needs to change course now, or he is going to be in serious trouble come November. He is risking his presidency to Donald Trump, to a fascist, in order to align himself with another fascist. And we cannot have that. As Democrats, we should be appalled. As American voters, we should be appalled at this. As people, we should be appalled and disgusted that our country and our government is complicit in a genocide, an ongoing genocide in 2024. We cannot allow this to happen. And that is what the Uncommitted movement is about. It is not an anti-Biden or pro-Trump campaign. In all honesty, I believe that this is a gift to Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, because we are literally telling them now that they are going to be in serious trouble. And we're giving the numbers to say, hey, you are going to be in trouble in November if you don't change course and you don't change your policy. And I'm not going to say that every voter who has voted uncommitted is not going to vote for Joe Biden or is going to vote for Joe Biden, especially within the Muslim and Arab American community, where we do not vote in a monolith. And there has been a deep betrayal in this community by President Joe Biden and his administration, that we are now at over 30,000 Palestinians murdered. We are at over 13,000 Palestinian children murdered. And we are seeing the complete destruction of Gaza, with over 2 million Palestinians displaced and 80% of their ancestral land and homes destroyed. So yes, there is a deep betrayal in this community who, no matter what happens, they cannot see themselves voting for Joe Biden. And this community knows firsthand what it means for another 4 years of a Trump presidency. Trump was not a friend to this community, but we are being asked to choose between bans or bombs. And what I think is going to be important come November, if we don't have the things that we have demanded, a permanent ceasefire and the end of this unrestricted flow of military aid to Israel, is we are going to shift these efforts to support our ceasefire champions. We are going to support people like Rashida, Cori Bush, the squad members, in order and hopefully get even more people, more electeds like Rashida, like Cori Bush, into office, into Congress, and in our state legislation. So I know I'm probably going over time, but thank you again. I could literally talk about this for like 2 more hours, but thank you again for having me. I do want to say that the Uncommitted movement was endorsed by UAW, Labor for Palestine, and in Washington State, this movement was endorsed by Washington State's largest labor union.
Thank you so much, Layla. Thank you for your incredible organizing and for your remarks and for the context on what's been going on. So appreciative of everything that you've been doing. Okay, I'm now excited to welcome Zana Ozier, a lifelong Dearborn resident who's been a Palestine Solidarity organizer for 15 years and is a member of USPCN, the U.S. Palestinian Community Network. In addition to her activism here in Dearborn and Detroit, she's been an attorney in the community and worked for the domestic violence program at Access, the Arab Community Center for Economic and Social Services, providing free legal assistance to survivors of domestic violence. Welcome, Zana. Thanks so much for being here. Oh, and I said that, but I did not bring her on yet. Apologies. Thanks so much for being here, Zana.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I had a minor freak out because the screen went away when I clicked join as panelist, but it's so great to be here with you all. A big thank you to the organizers of the event and to the other panelists. My name is Zana Ozier. I'm a Lebanese American woman from Dearborn, and I am first generation or second generation based on how you define it. I was the first generation born here in the US. And ever since I can remember, I have been, um, aware of the cause for Palestinian liberation, in part because my mother's family is from the south of Lebanon, and the village is called Barashid, and it was occupied by Israel until 2001. And so this is something that is very personal to me. And my first memory of being involved in a protest was after the massacre in Qana in 1996, which was in southern Lebanon, where the Israeli occupation forces targeted a UN compound where civilians were taking refuge, and over 100 people were murdered, most of whom were children. And so that's my earliest memory of going with my great aunt to a protest in Dearborn. And I've been doing that work ever since. As Andrew said, I've been an organizer in Dearborn and Detroit for around 15 years now. One of the things that I've been very passionate about, aside from Palestine Solidarity work, is building Arab and Black solidarity, and building the connections between communities. And above all, I'm a student of history, and I do want to honor and thank Jerome Scott and Alan Amen, who are also panelists today, for their work. I've studied the history of their time in the unions, and so I do want to pay homage to them. And pay homage to the fact that Detroit has a long history of working class organizing and building. And so, the reality is Israel is and always has been a violent, genocidal, settler colonial state. It was founded upon the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, even before 1948. And the US-backed Israeli genocide of Gaza is a continuation of that ethnic cleansing. And it's very much fundamental to the character of the Israeli state. And the immediate focus, as we have talked about, is organizing efforts around the ceasefire, because every day that this genocide continues is the loss of hundreds of Palestinian lives. But this can't be the only focus, and so I do appreciate that this panel is taking place to talk about other ways that we can resist and support Palestinian liberation. This emergent global mass movement for a ceasefire has to be situated within the larger framework of centering the permanent end of the siege on Gaza and working in solidarity with Palestinians to realize their collective liberation from Zionist occupation. And I believe labor is key in that fight. And there is a lot of power that can be leveraged within labor organizing. And so I think that, the conversation around ceasefire is immensely important. We do need a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire immediately. But I do think that it's important to keep into context, why and how this movement has grown so quickly, and pay attention to, not falling into the traps of getting folks on board to organize from a place of sympathy versus a place of solidarity. Because, right now, as we are watching this massacre, this genocide take place in front of our eyes, folks have a lot of sympathy, but that's not the same as solidarity. And so I think that we have to do everything in our power to stop the genocide. But once that's over, we have to do everything in our power to support Palestinians in their struggle for liberation. And it's my deep belief that sovereignty and self-determination of the Palestinian people is incompatible with the Israeli state, because, they've made it clear that they don't and will not allow an independent Palestinian state to exist in historic Palestine. And as we can see, that the 17-year-long siege on Gaza and the occupation of the West Bank are perfect examples of that. There is no way forward in that reality. And we have to work as hard as we can to keep this movement alive and move beyond ceasefire. And, Zionism goes hand in hand with imperialism, and it's why the United States supports Israel in the way that it does. And it's completely upended and destabilized Palestine as well as the surrounding countries. And so, in order to resist this, we have to fight a multi-front war. We have to be using everything in our arsenal to resist against this. And the Palestinians have made continuous calls for international solidarity, including the Palestine Trade Union. And so I do, want to encourage folks to continue that fight through your locals, through union organizing, and through working with community organizations who are protesting, who are going to the weapons manufacturers and trying to shut things down. And the UAW's call for a ceasefire was a testament to the organizing power of the rank and file. But then soon thereafter, Sean Fain endorsed Biden. And so I think, that is a huge contradiction. And it does show, the rift between the working class and the rank and file versus those in power. And I commend the Vote Uncommitted campaign. I think Layla and others are doing amazing work. I think that's one tactic that is being utilized. That is an important tactic. That sent a clear message to the administration. That being said, I think it's important to think about how we pivot once the general election approaches, because those votes are power, and I think it would be a disservice to the movement for Palestinians for us come November to vote for Biden in the general election. And personally, in my opinion, I do not care what Biden does right now. It will not rehabilitate him, in my eyes, for aiding and arming the genocide in Gaza. He has played an active role, and I don't think that can be discounted. And so even if he were to call for a ceasefire right now, it doesn't change the fact that over 33,000 Gazans alone, that's not even counting the folks in the West Bank who have been murdered by the Israeli military and settlers. He has supported this, and he has continued to allow the intentional starvation of the remaining population in Gaza. So I think the message now, as we do continue on with the uncommitted votes, I think that is important. But the message should be that Biden will not get our votes. And I think that, we have to recognize our power in electoral politics, but we also have to recognize the limits. As Layla said, we are being forced to decide between bans and bombs. And honestly, I don't want either. And I don't want to be forced into a position where that is where, that choice lies for me. And so I think, for us as organizers, as folks with a conscience, that means we have to pivot to other forms of organizing aside from electoral politics. And so with that, I think that, talking about how the labor unions can be involved in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, and how we can work to stop the weapons manufacturing is immensely important. And, I think that the US political establishment serves the same interests as Israel and the imperial interests. And they are never, whether it's Trump or Biden, they're never going to willingly undermine their relationship with Israel. So, ultimately, could we work towards empowering a third party? Sure. But at the end of the day, we are still within the empire. And we would have to have a complete shift in our political scope and our interests as a nation. And that is work that will take a long time to change. So I think we do need to use our collective power in ways that directly target those who are funding the genocide. These are our tax dollars that are funding it. Our government policies are enabling it, and our factories are manufacturing the weapons that are being used to slaughter Gazans. And meanwhile, domestically, Inequality is growing in Detroit and across the country. There's no affordable housing, no affordable medical care. Our schools are underfunded. And these corporations that are supporting the genocide and are funding it are profiting from our government's policies. And so I know this might sound like a bleak outlook when I put it this way, but I do think there's also a lot of progress that needs to be acknowledged. I do think that seeing such a mass mobilization for the ceasefire movement is a huge shift. And I think that that has shifted the general public view of Palestine and has shifted the dynamic. And so I think it is now that we need to take advantage of that. And just context for that, there are some figures that could help us show how the Palestine Solidarity movement has helped shift liberal opinion. From the radical stance, you are able to shift the mainstream views. So back in 2002, Democrats sympathized more with Israel than with Palestinians by a margin of 34 points. And then by as early as early 2023, that has shifted to favor the Palestinian struggle by 11 points. And in November, Democrats under the age of 35 were more sympathetic to Palestinians by 58 points. And so that is something that, the generational shift is a huge thing that needs to be utilized and needs to be understood, because there is, and if we look at our political leaders in this country, the huge divide in the people that they represent and them. And I think a lot of that is generational. You have these folks, the two oldest presidential candidates ever, so there is that divide as well as the generational divide, and we can see that in our candidates for this election. But yeah, so there has been a major shift. We see that in the universities as well. And so I will just end by saying there's been a lot of movement with trade unions across the world who have endorsed BDS. And so I think that there's so much power to be built there. I will encourage you all to work towards moving BDS forward. You can pass BDS resolutions through your local union. You can organize with community organizations who are working on other consumer boycotts. Get your national to join BDS, which I know you all are working on. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm also very hopeful because of work like this and events like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Zaina. And again, I want to point to all the great comments in the chat. You gave such inspiring words that folks just chimed in the chat, so be sure to check it out. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Alan Amen. He's a third-generation auto worker from UAW Local 600 in Dearborn, Michigan. He was instrumental in organizing the Arab American Worker Walkout in 1973. That Arab American caucus, which he was part of, wanted to pressure the then UAW president, Leonard Woodcock, and demand that the UAW divest from Israeli bonds. And Ishmael Ahmed, who is an amazing community organizer and a comrade of Alan's, described the action, this walkout, like this. He said, the UAW Arab American caucus wanted to point out the hypocrisy of this leader, who was Woodcock, who would force his constituency to finance the murder of their brothers and sisters back home with their union dues. And so Alan continues to advocate for Palestinian liberation till this day, and we're so glad he's here to tell us about the 1973 walkout, what it was like for the workers, and how it was born out of deep community ties within their union. So take it away, Alan. Andrew, you may need help unmuting and
I hit the unmute. Is it working?
We can hear you now, Alan.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I thought I had clicked on it. But what I was saying was my compliments to these dynamic young people who were the presenters before me, and to Martha Brevet too, for all the work that she's done over the years. Magnificent. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you. And yeah, I have some history about what happened back then. And I guess it's because I've lasted a long time. There were quite a few people that were involved in the organizing and pulling off the walkout that effectively changed the direction the UAW was going in regard to how it was supporting the state of Israel. We didn't stop it from doing that, but we were able to achieve some success in taking away one of the major flows of revenue to the state of Israel back in 1973. What happened was, I think, in fact, it might have been subsequent to Woodcock being identified as the recipient of the B'nai B'rith Anti-Defamation League Humanitarian of the Year Award. And it came out that he was being recognized for the fact that the UAW had purchased large amounts of Israeli defense bonds. There was also evidence that there was funding of a Walter Reuther chair at the Chaim Weizmann Nuclear Research Center. I shouldn't say nuclear research, it's the Chaim Weizmann Institute, but they do nuclear research as part of the program there. When we were made aware of that, it obviously upset many of us. And when I say us, by that time, after the 67 conflict, and after filing a lawsuit in federal court in the city of Dearborn, against the city of Dearborn for violation of civil rights in that they were attempting to destroy our entire neighborhood, the neighborhood had become much more active and much more aware of what was going on in the world and in the community. We wanted to do something. We organized, there was just a handful of us back in the days when I and Ish and my brother and other people were involved in trying to figure out how could we address this situation? The first thing we had to do was to get the Arab workers aware, involved, and organize them toward some action. What we did was we started working within the community, the lines of communication within the community, the ethnic and religious lines within the community, everything from the religious and ethnic groups, the village groups, the Beit Hanina, Ramallah. I mean, some of the women may recognize those organizations. The Yemeni community. We had a demonstration. We called it Middle East Liberation Day. We were allowed to march in our own neighborhood. That was fortunate. We got a license to march in our own neighborhood. So we had developed some energy and some activism toward those issues. And I described it once, and I got, actually, I was told this was a good way to describe it, but we worked within the social and the socio-political, ethnic, religious construct of the community to develop, like you would an octopus, tentacles that would reach out to the plants and develop caucuses in the plants, caucuses that would primarily be initiated by Arab workers, but would reach out to the Black workers and the white workers in the plant. And we counseled and it advised a lot of the people that were doing that kind of work in the plant. I was no longer in the plant at the time, Ish was no longer in the plant, and some of the other people that were involved in this nuclear organization. So, but we worked with the workers who were very much committed to what we were trying to do, and were willing not only to stick their necks out and but put the work in. And they developed coalitions among the workers in the plants and were able to feed them information. We had developed kind of a slogan, you know. The UAW was buying bonds, and we said from bonds to bombs to bondage. And that was the reality of what their union dues were doing. And they were doing it to the Palestinian people without any objection or any word raised by any of the leadership within the UAW. The night that Leonard Woodcock was going to receive his B'nai B'rith Anti-Defamation League Humanitarian of the Year award, and I repeat that because it really sticks with me sometimes. That was the night that we organized and targeted for the walkout. Thousands of workers walked out. We actually shut Dodge, Maine, which is a huge plant. We shut it down that night, and we rallied in front of Cobo Hall. We picketed Cobo Hall. Leonard Woodcock refused to cross our picket line because we were all UAW people. And they snuck him in the back door where they bring in the supplies and material. And after picketing the entire dinner and then marching from there to Kennedy Square and rallying and having an opportunity as the media was covering it to explain what our issues were. And we had so defined the issues, and I think you really have to narrow the issue down to its most basic points. And what rallied a lot of the workers, black and white workers, beyond the Arab issue was the very fact that union dues were flowing to a foreign country. They were paying union dues, and the money was going out of the country when there was so much need and so much want within our own ranks, within the communities in which these people, these workers were living. So there was this natural opposition to that particular action. And they were, I think that was probably the key to building the coalitions to begin with. And the coalition was effective because, like I said, enough people joined, walked out, the plant shut. I was one of the spokespeople that was appointed to be the media person. So I was pretty much involved in what was going on. And the media, they kind of cornered Leonard Woodcock as he was trying to leave again through the back door. And I still remember the image. Here was this union president, the international president, kind of breaking a sweat. And when asked about the action that was being taken and his workers striking, in effect, the union, he explained, he took a couple of minutes explaining that he supported the state of Israel, he believed in the state of Israel, and so on. And then right at the end, he punctuated his statement with, however, the UAW will no longer purchase any Israeli defense. And that was such a satisfying victory that we immediately got part of what we wanted. We then, by that time, the caucuses had actually set up a headquarters in a building. It was called the Hashmi Hall in the community in which I grew up. And I grew up with the local 600 and the union as part of my family, part of the institutions we relied on, very much a pro-union person, but willing to take action against the union because, you know, this is after 60s, the violence of 68, the changes that were happening. So it was no longer, you know, my country, right or wrong, but my country kind of attitude. And a lot of the people that we were aligned with felt the same way, and felt the same way about the union. You know, my union, and I support it, but not right or wrong. It's got to be right. You can't be doing these things. And Solidarity House sent Walter Darash and his financial secretary, Bob King. And I differentiate, that's not the Bob King that ultimately ended up down at Solidarity House and president. There was actually 2 Bob Kings at Local 600 at the time, to meet with us to resolve these issues. And we gave him a list of demands, and Darash looked over the list, nodded, showed it to his financial secretary, who nodded and handed it back and said, "Is this it?" And then my heart sank a little bit after all these highs of where we had gone. And the reason my heart sank is I knew if he accepted it so quickly, we shortchanged ourselves. We asked for too little. It should have been enough to at least get an argument out of him, but he immediately agreed, went into a diatribe that seemed to last forever, with every expletive in the book threatening us, up to and including murdering us if we ever involve or obstruct or you know, F word with the union again. So we were put on warning, and he stormed out. For the people who are aware of the geography of the South End, our headquarters was right across the street from the UAW. So we had to look at each other all day, every day. And I think it kind of got the leadership of the local a little bit upset. However, we did continue the caucus on. We had some success. There were some elections at the Rouge. One in particular, Ernie Lofton was running for president of the frame plant, and he needed help to get over the top. And we talked with him. He had aligned himself with us. He told us he was absolutely in agreement the UAW should never have spent any money there. We supported Ernie. He won his race. He ended up eventually a vice president down at Solidarity House, and was a great friend of the things that we did later on.
If you could just wrap up in the next minute or two, Alan, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, the actual workers' caucus kind of dissipated a little bit after that, although we did have some success threatening a strike against the AFL-CIO when they were sponsoring the HISTA group. We didn't pull off that strike, but we got the Metro Detroit AFL-CIO to support and pay for the largest pro-Palestinian demonstration that had ever been done in the Western world. And we got that done. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Alan. And sorry to cut you off there. We're a little over in our program time. So we had aimed, just to let everyone know, because we're past the hour mark now. We had, as Mark said in the beginning, we had aimed for an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes. And we're a little over. So we want to encourage folks to stay for the panel at the end after Jesse gives some brief remarks. But thank you so much, Alan. Your history of struggle, the connection you had to the sort of the shop floor from the community is an inspiration that I hope we can build on here in Detroit and Dearborn. So thank you so much. Yeah, and now I will sorry, give me 1 second. So I'm now really excited to welcome one more sort of organizer from that time who played a critical role. Give me 1 second so I can ask him to join us. Yeah, that's Jerome Scott. Jerome was an organizer with the League of Revolutionary Black Workers in Detroit, the radical organization that brought a militant class-conscious approach to the UAW in the 1960s and 70s. The League expressed solidarity with Palestine in a period when the labor leadership was fully supporting Israel, as Alan just described, and played a role in supporting the Arab workers in the 73 walkout at Dodge, Maine that we just heard about. Jerome's on the board of the General Baker Institute, which has been a great ally of UAWD here in Detroit. And he currently works with the League of Revolutionaries for New America. And I personally think that UAWD and the rank and file union movement more broadly has so much to learn from the Black radical tradition that Jerome and the League came from and developed. And so I'm really grateful to you, Jerome, for you to share your outlook on the struggle that we're a part of today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. First of all, I really appreciate having the opportunity to speak with y'all today. I think that this is a very, very important struggle for Palestine and Palestinians. I also think it's a very important struggle for the working class in the United States. So, first of all, let me just give you a little bit of history. I was working at the Chrysler Corporation. I started working there in 1967. You know, and 67, of course, was a hell of a year internationally. That was the war in the Middle East broke out in 67. And that was the first time that we began to get an understanding of the relationship between the UAW and Israel, and the fact that the UAW was using our dues money to support the state of Israel. And we got so interested in that because, you know, it was something that we had no idea about, that we decided that we needed to find out what was going on in Palestine. And so we eventually sent representatives to the Middle East to meet with the PLO, really fundamentally to try to figure out what was going on and how we could be in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And one of the things that they advised us, which we have kept with us, like I have kept with me for my entire life, is that our internationalism, our working class internationalism, the best way to express it is by stopping the US state from being able to support the state of Israel in its military adventures in the Middle East. That if we could organize in the United States to the point where we could actually prevent, you know, the United States from continuing their support for Israel, that would be an act of international solidarity that could not be matched. And we have held on to that. You know, that is our task. And when we look at the struggle that's developing, the genocide that's developing in Palestine right now, and particularly in Gaza, you know, the one thing that I think we have to really agree with and understand, some of the former panelists already spoke to it, that going back to the way things were before this genocidal war is not good enough. You know, there were already slow genocide happening in Gaza before this out and out war broke out. So we can't just go back to the way things were before this open genocidal war began. We have to be thinking about how we're going to really liberate the Palestinian people, help them liberate themselves, really, you know, because that's the heart of the struggle. And so I go back to that advice that the PLO gave us in 1967. And that was, we have to do something here to stop the United States. We have to support a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire, of course. But that should only be the beginning of our struggle, not the end of it, because we have to continue to fight to really prevent this state apparatus from supporting genocide all over the world. You know, and a lot of, you know, like the major question that have been asked here is this a question for labor to get into? I think that it is absolutely a question of labor to be into. Why? Well, first of all, the war in Palestine is a war against the working class of the Palestinian people. It is part of the international war against the working class throughout this world. And therefore, it's not just something that we should be sympathetic to. This is something that we know is coming toward us as well. So we better stop it now. And to emphasize again, the only way that we can really stop it and really set the basis for the liberation of Palestine is by setting the basis for the liberation of the working class here in the United States. And really what that means in its essence is that we have to be thinking about what kind of organization of society would not allow this kind of genocide to go on, not only in the name of the United States and with the support of the United States, but how can we be supporting the murder of all these women and children in Palestine? And so we have to stop our state from being the major supporter of this effort of the Israeli state and this really 100-year effort of the Zionists to create this state and to remove the Palestinian people from that area. Another question that keeps coming up to me is, why do the United States keep supporting this genocide? I think, and why does Joe Biden do it? And every time I hear that, I think, this is more than a Joe Biden question. This is a question of the ruling class of this country. We should center in on Joe Biden because he's the president, but we cannot lose sight of the fact that Joe Biden represents the ruling class of this country. And the decision of supporting the state of Israel or not is not really his alone. He's a part of that decision, but it is a ruling class decision. And as we all know, the ruling class decisions in this country, as well as throughout the world, are decisions that will protect capitalism and make sure that it is able to maximize its profits. So we gotta really understand this problem, not just as a problem of individuals making decisions, but as a class problem. That if we're going to help support the struggle to end this war immediately and support the struggle to liberate Palestine, we have to look at this as a class situation. We have to be able to stop the ruling class of this country from being able to make the kind of decisions that they're making. And the only way that we can do that is through a revolution in this country. And I know that's a far off notion, but let's not just be limited to what we can do today. We got to plan for what's going to happen over the next 10, 20, 30 years, And so that, and that's what I wanted to say about that. I was asked to say a little bit about the history of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. As you might know, there was a Wildcat strike in 1968 at Dodge, Maine, in which out of that strike became known as Drum, an organization of Drum, Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement. And it was out of that struggle at Dodge, Maine, that the League of Revolutionary Black Workers were established in 1969, 1 year later. And the thing that propelled the League of Revolutionary Black Workers was this notion that Black workers and other workers of color were at the point of production. If we could control the point of production, we could really express our power as workers and force not only the companies to do the right thing and protect workers in their facilities, but we could also, we could also use that power to really project outward into the community and into society as a whole, to say that if we stop production at these plants, if we shut down the economy of the auto corporation, what will that do to the rest of the economy? That would be a real expression of our power of workers at the point of production. So the League of Revolutionary Black Workers decided that we would concentrate on organizing workers at the point of production, and we would concentrate on understanding our international solidarity in trying to make sure that we can prevent our ruling class from doing what they really want to do internationally. And that's what I call on people today. I really support the previous panel members in their demands to stop this genocidal war, in their demand to support the liberation of Palestine, and added to that, our demand to liberate the United States working class, because that will be the way in which we can stop not only this genocidal effort, but the efforts that go on throughout the world today that the United States is mainly behind. And I thank you all for allowing me to say those few things. And hopefully we will see our pathway of unity, to make sure that we can get our job done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jerome. And thank you to all of our guest speakers for providing the context to understand how this broader community struggle for Palestine liberation, led by just regular people with radical ideas, and how it fits into our workplaces and our union. I can't tell you guys how much I appreciate you. It's incredible. So with that being said, I would like to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about a just transition and what that could mean for our weapons manufacturing workers. So in December of 2023, the UAW International Executive Board announced that the union would be joining for a growing number of labor organizations and calling for a ceasefire in Israel and Palestine. In addition to this statement, the UAW Executive Board voted to take it a step further and form a divestment and just transition working group to study the history of to study the history of Israel and Palestine, the union's economic ties to the conflict, and, in my opinion, the most exciting part, to explore how to achieve a just transition for U.S. workers. Setting out on this path is significant because the UAW represents hundreds and thousands of workers at weapons manufacturing facilities that send weapons to Israel military, such as General Dynamics and Caterpillar. But what would it mean for workers to actually make this idea a reality? A just transition for weapons manufacturing workers could allow them to use their skills and abilities to contribute to society in a meaningful way with positive impacts, ensuring that workers are protected and don't have to choose between putting food on their table or building weapons that kill children in Gaza and beyond. This idea could be groundbreaking and an impactful way for labor unions to help improve our whole society. Achieving a just transition will require workers coming together, challenging their bosses and the billionaires who profit from the violent conflicts abroad, and continue to feed the US and Israel war machines. But unfortunately, as I'll discuss in a few minutes, there have been examples of workers proposing changes in production to avoid losing their jobs. But in these examples, they're coming together to challenge management, roll back their control over production, and work towards a just transition during the times when weapons are in demand. The broad idea of a just transition, however, is no foreign term to UAW members, and the term has recently taken on a life of its own as auto workers fight for a fair transition into electric vehicles. Much like auto workers, weapons manufacturing workers can demand a just transition that protects their jobs and their standard of living while having a say in what their labor is used for. And while direct struggles against weapons producers have been attempted, this is not a revolutionary idea. Many activists have been fighting for decades for a just transition for weapons manufacturing workers throughout the whole entire nation in government-funded plans. They just call it an economic conversion. The concept acknowledges that we can shift away from the decade-long boom-bust cycle of weapons manufacturing to produce things that benefit society that we will always need. The idea of a conversion plan already has roots inside of the UAW. Walter Reuther started calling for a negotiated peace and fully coming out against the Vietnam War in 1968. He recognized quickly that ending the conflict in Southeast Asia would have economic ramifications within the US, much like the situation that we find ourselves in today. So Walter Reuther argued then that weapons manufacturing contractors, who at the time were employed 3.8 million American workers, should be required to avert layoffs and provide good working class union jobs by converting their operations to civilian production. This argument still holds true today. Walter was quoted saying, "The anvil in which peace is hammered out should not be on the heads and the back of displaced defense workers and their families." To make this conversion possible, Walter called on Congress to pass legislation requiring weapons manufacturing to put 25% of their after-tax profits into a federally managed conversion fund, which would be used to pay for the retraining and family benefits and pay of the workers during the period of the economic adjustment. Although the UAW didn't win this, Walter's idea had laid a foundation for what a just transition to a peace economy could look like. And his idea was the predecessor to later calls from unionists in the fossil fuel related industries for a just transition and to achieve a green economy. Ultimately, as rank and file unionists, we believe that workers themselves should drive their own struggles. But we've got some ideas for protections that workers could demand and fight for within contract negotiations to roll back management's rights and win control for a just transition in their union contracts. One of these ideas is the ability to refuse to use their labor to contribute to genocide free from punishment and retaliation. This would mean that workers could refuse a particular job on the line and must be transferred to another job or within the company or a job bank. Another idea is the job banks for displaced workers. These workers could volunteer their time serving the community, doing service work on behalf of the company. Workers would still receive their paycheck while they use their efforts and energy into helping the local communities instead of destroying communities in other countries. We could demand protection from layoffs, including 2 years of supplemental unemployment pay, full health insurance, and tuition assistance. Should any cancellations of the defense contracts with Israel or elsewhere impact the weapons business, this provision could protect the workers' pay and benefits and provide tuition assistance to help workers enter new fields of work. Another idea is an expanding grievance procedure that recognizes local protest against overseas genocide as a health and safety concern. These workers could ultimately grieve and then strike over this concern. This draws from successful community labor organizing of the Block the Boat actions, where longshore workers in some cases have refused to cross community picket lines, citing contractual safety protections, resulting in boats with Israel shipments going unloaded. And these would all go hand in hand with the long-term provision we could ask for. And that's that weapons manufacturing workers pay into a conversion fund or help commitments or make commitments to use manufacturing power to help contribute to the infrastructure of our society. Some of these demands, such as job banks and supplemental unemployment pay, have been won in the past in other contexts, like in the auto industry, to avoid layoffs, and they can be won again for the workers and to tap into their full power and make it up in this fight. But weapons companies could certainly resist this loss of control. And we need an unprecedented wave of worker militancy coordinated with community organizing and solidarity to be able to start to win this fight. Although there has been examples of worker-led conversion fights that have been centered around averting layoffs, fighting for more sustainable work, these ideas can be implemented as we fight for a conversion from a war economy to a peace economy. It also leaves room for us to carve our own path of what a just transition could look like for our workers. So I want you to ask yourselves today, what could our society look like if we took on this fight for a peace economy in the name of class consciousness and solidarity? And how can we draw on inspiration that we just heard from some of our guest speakers like Allen in the 1973 Arab American Workers Walkout? Because they taught us that the community organizing can extend into the plant and anchor military action. And that we shouldn't see workers who have the most direct material connection to weapons productions at odds with us in the community. In fact, the ability to shut down that production could serve as the most powerful community lever that we have. But for more information on just transition and the examples that I cited above, you can read a book called The 6 Stops of the National Security Tour, Rethinking War Economy by Miriam Plemberton. It's a really great book where she really dives into some of these examples. There's also a pre-recorded educational session that dives deeper into the concept of a just transition and shows how close this is to the UAW. You can view the presentation by visiting the link in the chat. If you reach out to me or Andrew or tomorrow, we can make sure to get you that link too after today's event. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists of rank and file union members who are actually starting to make these goals a reality, and they're doing organizing on their very own floor. So our panelists today are going to be Mary Germana Saba of UAW Local 4811. She's a filmmaker and a labor historian of all of the Arab world. Paul Stauffer, a UA member at Local 63 and a rank and file organizer. And then Marcy Pedraza, who has been an electrician for 25 years and is a member of Local 551. And she's from the southeast side of Chicago. She's also an environmental justice activist and a rank and file organizer. After a brief introduction from each of our panelists about themselves and their efforts, we'll have 2 questions for each of them before opening it up to a question and answer session with all of you in the webinar. Please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions, and Andrew and Tamar will help make sure that we get these questions answered for you. If you have any problems with the Q&A, feel free to message me, Andrew, or Tamar. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the questions. First, I'm wondering if you could introduce yourselves and spend a minute or 2 telling us about the efforts you've led on the shop floor for Palestinian liberation. Do you want to go ahead and get started, Marcy?
Yes, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Glad to be here, and it's so inspiring hearing the previous panelists. Definitely fired up. Like Jesse said, I'm Marcy Pedraza. I'm an electrician at Ford Chicago Assembly Plant, UAW Local 551. And just I'll try to be really brief. We passed a resolution back in January. Thankfully, everyone knew about the call for a ceasefire by the International in December, but I felt like we could take it a step further by following the Palestinian trade unions demands, which Martha spoke of earlier, the 5 demands. So I basically copied and pasted from other UAW locals resolutions and the Palestinian trade unions call, and presented it to our local membership at our meeting. Right beforehand, I didn't have a lot of time to organize around this. I just went around because we had committee meetings before our union meeting. And I spoke to some folks about it, saying, hey, I'm going to, propose this resolution. I appreciate your support. And thankfully, I got my union brother, Scott Holdison, to agree to second the motion for me, because we all know Robert's Rules of Order. If we don't have a second, we won't get a vote or any discussion. So, with some the points that were mentioned before, I also just wrote up, and I can probably share it in the chat or in the screen share later. And just to make it relatable to workers, and that might not know about this. And I first started organizing around Palestinian liberation almost 20 years ago. I went to my first rally in DC with the Arab American Action Network, and I was on a bus with a bunch of great women and children mostly, and I learned so much from them. And that just, fueled my interest to also stand in solidarity with them. And, as we know, Chicago has I think the highest population of Palestinians in the country. So these are our neighbors, my neighbors and my community. They're like just very important part of the community that I even live and work in. So, and I just wanted to tell, my fellow union members that this issue it affects us as workers, because as we know, our tax dollars are paying for this genocide. It's funding this genocide. And, while the government says they don't have money for the unhoused or public education or to fix our infrastructure or universal health care, yet they have billions of dollars to send to Israel for this genocide. And this needs to stop. So I know that workers are worried about jobs, but these companies are profiting from this genocide, and it's our tax dollars that are paying for this. We just had a trip to South Bend, Indiana, against a corporation called AM General, who makes Humvees for the Israeli military. And it was, I've been to marches in downtown Chicago and New York City, and it was great to see a smaller demonstration of about 100 people or so. Just shows that people all around the country are paying attention now, and hopefully people, we're trying to wake everyone up and listen, that we don't sit and be complacent anymore. So it's time we do make a just transition to a peace economy where we can make things that are better for our planet, like high-speed rail, electric buses, freight trucks, solar panels, wind turbines, and other green infrastructure. We shouldn't have to choose between good union jobs and our consciousness. We cannot continue on this path of war and destruction for the sake of our planet and all of its inhabitants. So we call for a permanent ceasefire and end the US-backed Israeli genocide in Gaza. And now we call on other labor unions to do the same, because we don't cross picket lines, we join them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just also wanted to make reference that in the chat, Michael was kind enough to go ahead and drop that resolution that Marcy was talking about. Paul?
Thanks, comrades. Yeah, great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, UAWD. I'm probably the first plumber to ever be on a UAWD panel. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering why I'm here. But yeah, I basically am a third-party contractor that works at, I do industrial plumbing service at the Caterpillar plant in East Peoria in Illinois. And it's unionized, it's UAW workers. And it's the plant that builds the D9R bulldozers that get sent to Israel that have been used in the genocide in Gaza. And Caterpillar's been partners with the Israelis for decades, I think since the 80s or 70s or something like that. So they've been longtime partners in the destruction in Palestine. And being in the plant now and even seeing them producing dozers, with the dark green paint, being up close and personal with them, it makes your stomach drop. And so yeah, I wanted to get involved. I wanted to try to see what we could do to push for divestment, follow the BDS call and push for a just transition. One of the easier aspects of organizing a CAT, particularly, is that it's not like a weapons manufacturer where if we ask the workers to stop producing for Israel, then there's nothing left to produce. That would be their argument, at least. But luckily, defense contracting is just a small part of CAT's profit base. I think it's only like 10% of their business goes to defense spending. But the majority of that, or the rest of it, is all mining and construction. So then we get back to just transition for environmental issues and things like that. So that'll be a big part of our organizing down the line too. But so what we're doing now is we're still flyering, we're still talking to workers, and we're really fortunate that it's a very diverse and a very politicized rank and file. I think they almost went on strike in the spring or last spring 2023, and there was a pretty big contingent of rank and file workers who pushed the union to take a better contract. So they're there, and for me, I think it's been very easy talking to workers about what's going on there. Everyone seems really receptive of the plight of the Palestinians, and there's a couple points we bring up a lot. I liked Zena's point about organizing from a place of sympathy versus from a place of solidarity. That really stuck with me, because there are workers over there too that are being oppressed. They're workers too. One of the things that we put on our flyers is that the CEO of Caterpillar, Jim Umpleby, made $20.6 million last year, versus the average Palestinian pay is $32 a day. So who do you think you have more in common with? Who are you going to listen to? And I tell a lot of people that one boot is on your neck from Caterpillars, and their other boot is on the Palestinians' neck at the same time too. They're trying to take your share away while they're profiting on rewarding their shareholders off of selling weapons to the Israelis, to hurting other workers. So yeah, and I always bring up at the beginning of right after 10/7, there was the Palestinian workers are their cheap, exploitable labor supply in Israel. I think a lot of people don't pay attention to that. So that it didn't really come up a lot because but there was like 3,000 something workers who were confined. They were working in Israel as 10/7 event was occurring, and they were detained and tortured for a month, just for being Palestinian workers in Israel. And if that was us there, if we were workers in Palestine, that would have been us. We would have been there too. And so all these things resonate with workers. They understand injustice and they understand being oppressed. And so yeah, everyone's really receptive, and it's going really well so far. And yeah, I'm just so honored to be on this panel, man. What an incredible group of people. Some of my role models in organizing. I can talk about. A lot of my coworkers know not to ask me about union business and stuff, because I'll just talk about UAWD and TDU and drum for like an hour and a half. They'll just tell me to shut up. So it's amazing to be on a panel with this group of people. Hopefully we can be emulating that in the building trades sometime soon. But as of right now, I'm happy to be here with you all today. So I appreciate it.
Honestly, Paul, it's an honor to have you. I think you're doing incredible work. And I just want to encourage everybody to look in the chat section, and you can find an article that Paul wrote in these times, which was incredible. Mary?
Hi, everybody. And what an honor to follow Paul and Marcy. My name is Mary Germano Saba, and I'm I'm Palestinian and Lebanese, and a rank and file member of UAW 4811 at the University of California. We've just changed our name. And you might be familiar with UAW 2865, which was formerly the name of our local, as the first union local in the US to pass a BDS resolution. And that was 10 years ago. That was back in 2014. And that resolution passed with overwhelming support, and it was actually overturned by the UAW International Executive Board at the time. And so thankfully we are in a slightly different situation right now with an executive board that passed a ceasefire resolution, a historic ceasefire resolution, as a result of our organizing. I also will be a little bit brief, and I want to say that I really want to echo some of the things that Paul and Marcy said just a couple minutes ago, which is that in that drive 10 years ago, and in the organizing work that we have been doing right after the start of this genocide. So just to sort of say, I've been involved in drafting a BDS pledge for the UAW broadly, and we also most recently this past week, our chapter at the University of California, Berkeley, just passed a resolution committing to bargaining around boycott, divestment, and sanctions from companies which are profiting from the occupation of Palestine, and specifically military contractors like Lockheed Martin. And that resolution passed overwhelmingly. In fact, they didn't even count the votes because it passed sort of so clearly. There were a few hundred people in the room. And I just think that overwhelmingly what we found is that when people understand, when they know what's going on, when we're able to talk to our coworkers about Palestine, it's a human issue. It resonates. People are watching what's happening. They see, and it's just logical to do the right thing. And I think that this kind of question of a just transition is so important, not only in thinking about the weapons plants, because, of course, as has been said, this deal with sending money to Israel is that the military funding to Israel is that they have to buy the weapons from US plants, right? And a lot of those plants are unionized, and a lot of those plants are unionized UAW, just to kind of repeat that point. But the thing is that the university itself is also one big weapons shop. It's not just that the weapons are made in these weapons shops and then sent, and it's sort of this like class divide, right? University workers are also participating largely in this kind of sort of system of deeply entrenched militarism, especially in the science and technology, engineering and mathematics. And just for reference, the University of California in the year 2022 alone had $295 million of research funding from the Department of Defense, right? That's just in 1 year. And so it's really all along the supply chain. It's incredibly important that we start these conversations not only just right now with the urgency of ending the genocide that's happening, but also in sort of seeing our shared humanity and seeing the ways that we're all so deeply invested in militarism. And I'll just sort of say, you know, really, really briefly, I've been involved in various kinds of organizing around Palestine pretty much since I was a child. But, you know, I remember back in 2004 and 5 or 3, whatever, right after the war in Iraq started, when people that I had gone to high school with and members of our community groups, our movement communities, had family members going to war in Iraq, right? And particularly folks from immigrant and working class communities. And a lot of people would say, oh, well, you know, they don't have a choice. They have to go to the military. They don't have a choice. And I don't think I knew what to say at the time. And the thing that I, you know, have realized is that as movements, we need to give people a choice. We need to organize to be able to give each other the choice to divest from the military machine at all levels, right? We have a moral obligation to organize our workplaces and our communities, to refuse to participate, to answer the call from the Palestinian trade unions, to not cross that picket line, and to refuse to send weapons to Israel, and more broadly speaking, to refuse to continue this cycle of investing in death and in corporate profit lines. Going forward, all of us together, we can make this change. And in fact, we have to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mary. I love the way you worded that. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask the next question, which is, what brings you as a worker to the issue of Palestine liberation? Are there any concrete or material ways in which you and your coworkers are impacted by the apartheid and the genocide in Palestine? Paul, do you want to go ahead and get started with this question?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been a supporter of Palestine. When I was an undergrad, I was a member at SJP. So I've always been, and that was, you know, a long time ago now, 10 years ago. So but then when I became a plumber, you know, this is still something I don't hear about either. And whenever I get a chance to talk about it, I want to bring it up to people, because even in among Palestinian supporters, it's not really talked about widely. But when I became a plumber, I learned about the level of apartheid that impacts their water systems and their wastewater systems, and how badly, even prior to October 7th, 96% of the water supply in Gaza was unfit for human consumption, because the Israelis had just bombed in Gaza. They bombed their wastewater treatment plants, and so raw sewage was spilling right into the Mediterranean, and then that feeds their aquifer. So even prior to that, they were only getting the water wasn't safe for human consumption, but that's their only source of water there. So yeah, and the Israelis have a history of in the West Bank too. They're not allowed to dig wells. They're not allowed to collect rainwater. And then right next door, you know, Israelis will be swimming in swimming pools. So it's eye opening. You know, if I don't understand how people can deny the Palestinians living under an apartheid system when they can't even drink water, or you know, they don't even have proper access to sanitation there. And then I think everyone's seen the statistics prior to October 7th. They shut down obviously the electrical systems and the water systems that were going in to Gaza, and now Gazans are only getting by on 2 to 3 liters of water a day, whereas the WHO recommends that people need a minimum of 100 liters a day. So 2 to 3 liters is a half a gallon, and that's for drinking, that's for bathing, that's for cleaning. It's and that was from a couple months ago, so it's probably even less than that now. So that's my direct connection to it from my work, but beyond Caterpillar, obviously that's. But the other thing I wanted to bring up with that, which I thought was funny too, is that it's such a major issue there, and the Caterpillar Foundation, it's their nonprofit wing. Their big spiel is providing safe drinking water access around the world. That's what they tout. And meanwhile, they're supplying, you know, one of the major water crises in the world as they speak. So it's another opportunity for me to, you know, another point that we can use to be like, look, they're denying water to the Palestinians while, you know, they're painting themselves in this positive light with their foundation work here too. So it's helpful in that respect. But yeah, it's just so blatant. But that's my direct connection to it.
Thank you so much. Mary, do you have any comments on that?
Just to say, I'm directly impacted by this situation. My father's family was displaced in 1948 by Israel. My mother's family was displaced in 1982 by Israel. I was myself bombed by Israel in 2006 in Lebanon. My partner's family lost, he lost 9 members of his family in the current genocide who were sheltering in a church in Gaza early on. But, again, I guess I'll just say we are all impacted by this in the ways that Marcy and Paul have drawn out. And, if it's something that we can't sort of see in a daily way, I just keep repeating all of that this Gaza is being used as a test case for future situations of figuring out what to do with climate change. I mean, this is sort of the corporate-led, fossil fuel driven model for thinking about how to repress dissent and how to get people to just kind of give in. And Palestinians are really, showing us the way forward in saying no.
Yeah, absolutely. Marcy?
Yeah, as I mentioned, when I first got, involved with this at our bus trip to DC and then, other subsequent marches and rallies. But just as an activist in general, I come from the southeast side of Chicago, and the work I do with the Southeast Environmental Task Force, we're constantly fighting toxic polluters trying to dump on us in our neighborhood, in our backyards, literally across the street from a high school, my daughter's school, and a park. And just seeing the similarities in what's going on all over the world. I mean, we know this is the direct result of capitalism, imperialism. They want to control us. They want us to fight against each other. They want workers in factories to fight against skilled trades. They want all of us to fight against academic workers. But we're all workers, right? And just, Paul just made me think of the fight for clean water, like in my neighborhood. Well, in Chicago, now we have the highest amount of lead service lines in the country. And, we've seen this before in Flint and other areas of the country and the world. And, the city says it's going to take years and years to replace these lead service lines. And because, right, there's no money, but we know there's money. It's just, where is the money going? So that's how I just continue to fight.
Awesome. I want to encourage anybody that has any questions to go ahead and put them in the Q&A. We do actually have one that came through the audience that I'm going to direct towards Mary. And then we have just a few more. I think we're going to be running another like 15 to 20 minutes, if that's okay with everybody. I just think that this is really compelling and would love you guys to stay. So Mary, the question is, what can we do as union workers and Americans to help the effort on an individual level? Are there boycott lists? Are there established forms to contact local and state representatives to be heard about this issue?
Yeah, thank you, Julian, for that question. And I will direct you to the BDS National Movement website, which is the BDS campaign, which has lists of products that you can boycott. And, as union workers, so there's of course, there's different things at different levels that we can do. As union workers, we can pass resolutions and I'm going to put the resolution from that we just passed this last week, resolutions to call on our employers to divest from Israel and to divest from military companies and people profiting from the occupation. And of course, that's also something that we can do at a local and state level, right? There's lots of people going around right now passing ceasefire resolutions at city levels, which is very exciting and important and galvanizing. Like, it's getting a lot of people involved. And at the same time, like, how much of that public money is also invested in companies like, Caterpillar, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, right? All of these companies that have made a killing off of killing people. And so that, I think, is the next step, right? The call from the Palestinian trade unions is not just to pass symbolic language, but it is to do things that make a direct economic impact on the occupation, on Israel's ability to continue it's genocide. And without the support of the US, none of this would be possible, right? They just don't have they don't have the money. And yes, I would also direct you to Adala campaign and the USPCR campaign for Palestinian rights also has established forums to contact local and state representatives. But certainly getting involved locally is an incredibly important way to kind of move forward with BDS.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I have another question for all of our panelists. What challenges have you faced while trying to organize around this on the shop floor? How have your coworkers reacted, and how do you respond? Marcy, do you want to go ahead and get started with that?
Oh, sorry, I was answering a question in the chat.
Oh, you're fine. If you want to take a minute and answer it live, that's
no, it's fine. I typed in the link, or not the link, but about the documentary on Hulu about Trouble on Tap, about the lead service lines. So just, you know, as far as talking to coworkers about it, I know it's not easy, but we need to keep having these discussions. You know, it's hard to just come up, you know, talk to somebody like, hey, have you heard what happened and, you know, across the world last night? You know, it's not necessarily the most uplifting conversations, but, you know, as far as what happened in our union meeting, the resolution did pass overwhelmingly, but there was some pushback. There were a couple members that wanted more information or didn't want, you know, didn't support this and definitely voted against it. Just a couple, I think. And then, you know, after that, just from seeing posts on social media, there were some hateful comments and things that I just didn't have the energy to address because, you know, I'd rather focus my energy on positive things and actions and work than, you know, fighting an internet troll. But they're out there, and we still need to talk to them if we can. And we're not going to change everyone's minds, you know, but if for the sake of humanity and all of us, if we're true, you know, citizens of this planet, we need to talk to each other and work together. Otherwise, we will never make change.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Paul, what about you?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You know, to me, talking to the workers about Palestine is the best part of it. It's the easiest. I mean, not easy. It's hard to mobilize workers, but like they understand. They're people. They're receptive, like I was talking about earlier. And you know, I think everyone has this idea of you know, the MAGA Republican that you're going to come up to at the plant, and they're, whoa, you know, Israel's our ally, blah blah blah, and most workers aren't as politically activated, you know, and you're going to get some like that, definitely, but most people are just regular people trying to get through their workday, you know, and they're not watching the news every day. They're not totally up to date on what's going on, and so our role is to advocate and organize and to educate, you know. And when those people are extremely receptive of what we have to say and what's going on, so that part is great. You know, mobilizing them is a challenge, but the hardest part for me, obviously, and then on top of being an outsider at the plant, you know, I'm not a full-time UAW member, and I'm not in the plant full-time, so that's challenging too. But beyond that, it's been really challenging for me and kind of surprising for me working with the lack of class consciousness in like progressive pro-Palestinian circles in the community, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it, but you know, other people might be running into these issues as well. But I had to pull some of these other organizations, you know, and everyone's got their own focuses and stuff like that. But when I brought up this opportunity to, you know, make a material change right here where the D9s are built in their own backyard, you know, we can hit Israel where it hurts financially and materially. And a lot of people don't see the value of it. You know, talking to workers, they, you know, even some people were like, well, you know, can't we just talk to Caterpillar or management? You know, can't, like, they still have one of their big headquarters there. And it's like, well, you know, what's the benefit of talking to the workers? You know, they don't really have a lot of power. Like, don't we want to talk to the decision makers? And man, you just want to rip your hair out. But that's part of our job, is to educate them as well. You know what I mean? So the labor movement has been so defanged over the past 40, 50 years. And even in progressive circles, you know, people can think we can just vote our way to socialism in some circles. And these ceasefire resolutions are great. They play a huge important role, obviously, and it's got Biden sweating, and you know, it's a lot quicker than like the amount of time it takes to organize these shop floor actions that can push for these changes radically. But we can't go it alone just on the electoral route. You know, we need to build deep, highly organized, highly mobilized, revolutionary worker movements, and I think that's the only way that we're going to achieve these longstanding gains that we want to see in society for just transition and for you know, decolonized movements around the world and things like that. And you know, first we got to work in house and educate the people in house that's the direction we have to move in. We have to organize the workers, and that's been a challenge for me. But that's yeah.
And Mary, I'm very interested to hear your answer for this also, but I was wondering if you could maybe touch on Local 2325's resistance to the congressional witch hunt also.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. And of course, I couldn't talk about that as well as some of my comrades who were involved in it. But essentially, Local 2325 is a primarily legal staff or entirely legal staff local who has been, I don't even know how to describe in speaking of pushback, put forward a BDS resolution at the beginning, again, back in October or November, had a few small minority of the organization, of the local, filed a lawsuit against the union to prevent them from putting this BDS resolution out to a vote. Now, of course, that galvanized the union and people really learned about it. And kind of like what Paul and Marcy are saying, the more discussion, you know, the more that people just see like, oh, this is the right thing to do. And so eventually they won in court and they were able to put that BDS resolution forward, and it passed again overwhelmingly. But then they were subpoenaed, as Sophia here is putting in the chat, 3,000 legal service workers in New York. They were subpoenaed by Congress in this congressional witch hunt against free speech over Palestine to come in and show up and you know, defend why they were putting forward this BDS resolution. So, and they refused. Being lawyers, they understood that they had the legal right to not go, and they didn't go. But I think that what that really shows here is the weight of, and you know, who is running that committee. It's these very, you know, well-heeled Congress people who are probably or definitely profiting over this genocide, and they're pushing it with a lot of money and the force of the US government against this small legal services local who's fighting back, right? And so I think that a lot of that time that there's opposition to these kinds of discussion, it's actually because there's so much money and power behind trying to repress popular discussion about Palestine. So, but again, you know, like as Paul and Marcy are saying, when you talk to people about this situation, and you can connect on a one-to-one level, that people can see the situation for what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I just want to give another quick thing that if anybody has any questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. If not, then I think that we'll just go ahead and start wrapping it up. There is another question, but if you guys have any last words really quick, we'll go to Marcy to wrap it up, and then I'll direct this question at one of you. 1 second. Oh, you're on mute, Marcy.
I thought I clicked it. Yeah, just wanted to say thanks for having me on this panel, and it is an honor to be speaking amongst you all and our previous speakers as well. And, you know, let's just keep taking it to the streets and shouting until someone hears us, and call your local electeds from the very local level all the way to the national level. I mean, a group of us in Chicago, group of other organizers, different unions, we had a Zoom meeting with our local Congresswoman, Robin Kelly, in our district, and unfortunately, she did not want to sign on to a ceasefire call because she felt like if this resolution is never even going to come to a vote, that there was no point in her voting or supporting it if it's not going to be voted on. And we just took that as a, just bullshit answer. So let's vote these people out. They've been supporters of labor, but on this issue, if they're not willing to take a stand, then it's time for a new representation. A lot of our electeds been in office way too long. And there are some good supporters here in Illinois on the local level. So just try to find the ones in your area that will support you. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. And Paul, any closing words?
No, it's such an awesome part to be part of this panel. Yeah, I would just keep an eye out on what the Palestinian trade unions are asking for us to do and do everything we can to show solidarity with them. That's it.
Thank you so much for being here too. And Mary?
Yeah, I just thank you so much to Jesse and to all the organizers of this panel today, and to Marcy and Paul for all the work that you're doing. Because of course I'm doing this because it's my homeland, or it's my who I am, but we're all connected. It's really so clear how we're all connected and how we all understand that. And I guess I would just say, like, the point of this panel is in fact to emphasize that idea of what we can do inside the labor movement. And I think Paul's point about community groups, not seeing that potential, because the labor movement has been so destroyed in the last 50 years, not just in the US, but everywhere. But in fact, we have to believe, and we have to put the time into creating those relationships and to repeating the kinds of experiences that Alan and Jerome spoke about earlier. We just look back at that and we think like, oh, that happened in the 70s. Like, that was a different time, but it doesn't have to be. They were very systematic. They built relationships. They followed they put for themselves a programmatic agenda and they followed it. And we can do that too. And in fact, we absolutely have to, because all of our futures depends on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I would also like to bring Alan back in, because Alan did want to make a suggestion on what individual workers can do. And I think that we can just learn so much too from, the history. So can we bring Alan back in, Andrew?
Yeah, Alan, I think you need to turn your video on for me to spotlight you, but I'll take everyone else's spotlight away, so then we can all be on here for a minute before wrapping up, and you can share your thoughts.
Can anybody hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to add, one of the things that we found out, learned in trying to organize the workers around the issues that we brought forward is how upset it made people to learn something that had been kept a secret from them, to get the kind of truth about what's going on, as opposed to the story that powers that be want to sell. By way of example, none of the workers that we approached had any clue that UAW dues could even be manipulated in the way they were being manipulated, and that really upset them. So they joined, I think there were workers who joined to get that process, whether or not it had anything to do with Israel or not, wasn't as important as stopping the mechanism of sending money outside the country to serve somebody other than the workers and the families of the people who provided the money. There is, for example, if I could just say, Caterpillar. Do the Caterpillar workers know that they're actually building weapons. The Caterpillar bulldozer was the one that ran over Rachel Corrie, who stood in front of the bulldozer and tried to stop the illegal, by international law, destruction of a home. And it was the Caterpillar bulldozer that ran her over and then backed up over her. And that kind of image in somebody's mind could really upset them, that these things are happening. So I'm just, it's almost like you have to be a proselytizing force to bring the issue to your fellow workers. That is, to me, the one-to-one, worker-to-worker is the most effective line of communication that a mobilizing movement can have. Anyway, I just wanted to add that.
No, that's absolutely right, Alan. I mean, I can't agree with that anymore. Paul wants to have like a direct response to that.
Yeah, and adding off of that real quick, sorry, Alan, but not only that, but Caterpillar, after Rachel Corrie's family sued Caterpillar to accept responsibility for it, they paid people to spy on her family. So it's not only that, but like they're actively trying to cover up their crimes. So yeah, a lot of workers do know about it, but a shocking number of them don't. So yeah, that's one of the things we try to bring up with them right away. But yeah, and that shows that they're actively, trying to cover it up and don't want the workers to know about it. Yeah.
Again, I just want to thank every single person that made this possible today. I mean, it's just incredible to hear like the history and the activists in the community and the activists inside of the UAW. And Paul, you being an activist and helping out the UAW when you don't even have to. It's just incredible and it's so inspiring. And I hope everybody else feels inspired by everything we talked about today. I really want to encourage everybody to go ahead and drop some of their contact info in the chat so that we can make those connections and we can continue to build off of each other, right? It's all synergy and we're all better when we work together. And that's what it's all about. That's what unions are about, is collective action. So please go ahead and drop your contact info in the chat so that people can reach out to you so that we can do all of the hard work moving forward to make sure that, we just make the best possible changes to society as we can. I just want to thank everybody again for being here. I want to thank UAWD for hosting this event and for allowing us to have this opportunity in this space. Please, if you can, join UAWD. We have meetings. We're going to do a lot more events on this, hopefully in the future, and continue working together and highlighting all of this work that needs to be done. But thank you, everybody, again. I really, really appreciate it. Solidarity forever.
Thank you all so much. Solidarity forever.
Am I supposed to do something?